And primaries in swing state Michigan saw establishment Democrats lose to DSA and socialist-aligned opponents. Joining us now for analysis is Alvin Lui. He's president of Courage is a Habit. Alvin, thanks for joining us. There you are. Now, while the DSA-backed Abdul El Sayed's victory in the primary is a shocker to many, and it does raise questions about the Democratic Party's future, U.S. policy, especially left-wing policy, that as a whole has been moving in a more collective socialist direction for a long time now. It's nothing new. So do you see this primary as yet another potential step towards realizing a larger socialist vision?
Oh, 100%. If anybody's paid any attention to the way government K through 12 has been operating, this should be no shock. As one of my favorite quotes is Abraham Lincoln, the philosophy of the schoolhouse in one generation will be the philosophy of government in the next. And for the last 20 years, especially really heavy in the last 10, critical race theory, socialism, communism, anti-white, anti-America, that's been in K through 12. That is always the crystal ball. You want to know what the rest of the country is going to be moving to. You want to know what politicians, especially the left wing, the Democrats, look at K through 12. And it's no shocker that we've got people now that are openly saying how much they hate America and they want to transform it. So that is the Democratic Party. That is education. They work hand in glove. The children are the incubators, and then they're the future voters, and they will happily vote for these socialists, these Muslims, these Somalians, anybody who hates America.
Wow, and that Honest Abe quote, very powerful indeed and very apropos. Now, Alvin, what is the significance of socialist platform candidates winning these primaries, not only on the coast, but right now in the manufacturing heart of the country in Michigan?
Well, it goes to show you that it doesn't matter where you live, so long as they can get to your children, and they have your children 7 hours a day, 5 days a week for 13 years, if you go from K to 12. And so it doesn't matter what the state was when you were growing up. We hear this all the time at Courage is a Habit. This is not how it was when I was growing up. This is not how school was when I was going to school. We understand that. I didn't think it would happen here. We understand that. You just got your average people that just waking up. You've got your average American named Harley that's just waking up, doing her business, doing her hobbies, and focusing on her life, not understanding that while she's working on her life, these communists are working to subvert your children. And so when you see somebody like this guy who just won the primary, it's just they're just moving they're moving the Overton window. And so it doesn't matter whether he wins a general or not. That's not the point. So one of the mistakes I see on our side is if someone like him, who's like super radical, loses, they celebrate. They go, "Oh yeah, see, we won, and thank God," and all those kind of things. It doesn't matter. If the fact that he's won the primary, if he loses the general election, someone like him and more radical than him will win the general the next time, because they're going to train your children to vote for him. So yeah, maybe they don't get it in Michigan or Nebraska or wherever they're doing these really radical people, but the eighth grader today, the 10th grader or the eighth grader today, the seventh grader today will vote for the next one. That's the bellwether. That's the crystal ball.
Well, what you're saying is very profound in terms of the long game, and that ultimately is the most important thing fundamentally. But the short game is really important too, because we're talking about the balance of Congress. So in these elections, do you chalk any of it to candidate personality, as these particular candidates like Mamdani here in NYC, they're strong orators, and to be honest, in some instances, they seem much more relatable to the younger generation than were their opponents, particularly in this case in Michigan. So does candidate strength play into this?
It's not about candidate strength, it's candidate familiarity. If you tell children since kindergarten about marginalized people, and by the time middle school, they know the words oppression and racism and all these different things, and white man bad, straight white man bad, America is oppressive, it's built on slaves, and those kind of things. When they hear it from a candidate, it's not that the candidate is so charming or viable, but because they've been drinking that for 13 years, when a candidate talks the way they've been hearing, It's familiarity, it's relatability, exactly what you said. So it doesn't matter what they are in reality. All it matters is that their voting block, what they've heard in school, in college. A lot of people who vote for people like him are these insufferable woke white women. They've heard it in college. They got a ton of white guilt. So that's where the relatability comes in, is because they've been drilled in that at a very early age. And then if you go to college, they get it in college even more, which is why the people who go to college are more socialist and more communist than the people than their people 15 years ago, 20 years ago.
Well, you've just revealed something that I've been hearing in all these interviews I've been doing. Everybody's saying that it's the educated that are actually going for these progressive candidates, and those who don't have those advanced degrees are actually, voting more centrist or to the right. And you've just revealed why that is. And I want to talk about those older voters because, they might not even recognize this as the JFK or Bill Clinton-style Democratic Party. So what's happened to openly espouse socialist and communist ideas within the Democratic Party? How has it changed so much?
Well, I don't think the Democratic Party has changed. They've been more emboldened. They've always been who they are. It's just that they couldn't, when Bill Clinton was in the 90s, they couldn't come out and sound like Mandami. There's no way they wouldn't go anywhere. And that's the thing about communism. When people like you and I, my friend, when our feet hits the ground, we think about our business, how we can help our friends, family, and just our little world. But when a communist foot hits the ground, they're all about infringing on your freedom and how they can move their mission, which is communism in America. And so taking over the Democratic Party wasn't very difficult because they're already leaning that way. The only thing that was working against them was time and scalability. And so time, they have it. This is the 100-year march. Anybody who understands communism, they already laid down the law 80, 100 years ago. It's a 100-year march. And so that they're almost there. They're about 80 years into that. And then scalability was that they couldn't get to that rural area, that red area. They couldn't get to those churches and the Christians and all those things. And they found it with education, with the schools. When you call it education, it's just the government K through 12 schools and colleges. So that was their missing piece. That was the missing puzzle, that they couldn't scale it. And once they were able to get a hold of colleges, train the school counselors and teachers to bring it into the K through 12, that was their missing piece, which is why a lot of people feel like, how come it feels like it's all of a sudden over the last 10, 12 years or so? It's not that it's all of a sudden. It's just that they were building for so long, and now they're able to scale it in government K through 12 and in colleges and things. And so, yeah, you're right. It's when you say educated, it depends on what you're saying. Educated how? It's not the education that you and I are talking about.
Well, you articulate it in such an easily understandable way. A very illuminating discussion. Alvin Lui, President, Courage is a Habit. Thank you so much for joining this evening.
Nice to see you again, my friend.